My name is Joe Manzo. I was born in Long Island, Queens, New York, March the 6th, 1945. I don't remember moving because I was still an infant when my parents moved to Brooklyn, and that's where I spent most of my life. My father was a shoemaker, and my mother was basically a homemaker, but she also helped my father in the shoe store. Matter of fact, I used to go to the store too to help my father in his shoe repair shop. And the reason I went there was usually because I did something that wasn't too good, whether it was in school or misbehaved at home. And I would have to go there and shine shoes. And I had just turned 18, and the Vietnam War was getting pretty heavy, and they were starting to draft. And I figured, well, let me boost my draft. That's what you could do. You could put your name basically on the list to get drafted. When I was just 18 years old, I went into the United States Army for 2 years. And I never went anywhere other than Brooklyn. Gotta admit, I was very happy that I was going to Korea and not going to Vietnam like a lot of my friends did. When I got to Korea, there was a Jeep blown out right outside my fort where I was stationed in Korea. I spent 13 months, a little over a year in Korea, and I came back and I made Specialist 4th Class, and 1965 I was discharged from the Army with an honorable discharge. When I came home from the Army in 1965, my father had convinced me to take the New York City police test. I never wanted to become a police officer. Nobody in my family was a police officer. None of my friends were police officers. But I took the test, and I scored very well. And they sent me a letter saying, you passed the test, you're on the list, and then you just got to wait. And they sent me another letter to go for a medical. And I threw it in the garbage because I didn't want to become a police officer. And then another letter came. I don't remember exactly when the second letter came, saying if I don't answer it, I'm going to be taken off the list. But I didn't get that letter. My father got that letter. So my dad's got the letter, and he says to me, what are you going to do about this? And I said, what is that? You know, I tried to make believe I didn't know. And anyway, he convinced me that I should go for the medical and go from there. Next thing I know, I'm in this room with a bunch of other people, and we're getting ready to get sworn in as New York City police officers. And this now is in April. I'm now what they call a recruit, and I'm still in civilian clothes. And 2 days later, Martin Luther King gets shot. There were riots going out in the street, and they needed police officers out in the street, and that's why they picked the academy class. And the next day I put on the gray uniform, and I got my gun belt on, I got a gun on, no training whatsoever, and we got our assignments, and I'm assigned downtown Brooklyn, where my father's shoemaker shop was, and for glass detail. And glass detail is to make sure people, when they start riding, they don't break all the windows, because you had big department stores. And now it's December 1968, and they tell me that I'm assigned to a precinct in Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn. And I'm not your class is out of the police academy. After spending approximately 13 years in Bedford-Stuyvesant, I then became a highway patrol officer, something I always wanted to do. Always was intrigued by the Harley-Davidson motorcycles. And in April of 1988, I decided to retire from the New York City Police Department.
My name is Ellen Vita. I grew up in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn with my two sisters and my mom and dad. We lived in an apartment building. Back then there was no air conditioning, and I can remember nights in the summer with the window open and the fire escape and kind of sleeping with my head out the window on the fire escape, which you could never do today. My mom used to teach me how to care for my dolls and take care of them, and she was so good about playing with dolls that I took such good care of my dolls that they would go to bed at night, and I saved quite a few of them from when I was a little girl. Unfortunately, not all of them, because we lived in a 3-room apartment, as I said, so my mom, unbeknownst to me, did get rid of some of my bigger dolls. Didn't find that out until I was older. I just liked dolls, always did. In fact, I grew up wanting to have a dozen children. Didn't work out that way. I've never had any children of my own. There were some issues there that I didn't have any children of my own, but my husband has 2 wonderful children and 3 great-grandchildren, so, and I helped them with their dolls. Unfortunately, they didn't like dolls as much as I did, but Mona was a doll that, my large mannequin doll that my husband and I got when we were together in Brooklyn, and she was, a friend of ours was selling a bridal shop, and he was getting rid of his mannequins, and she was just so beautiful. And I said, to me, she was just a big doll. So we dressed her up for every holiday. We dressed her up in my wedding dress on our anniversary. She got dressed for Christmas. She got dressed for Halloween. Now I don't dress her as often because it's a chore to pull her apart, but I love Mona, and she's in my collection. When I was growing up as a teenager, I had a boyfriend. I won't mention names, and he was a little bit verbally abusive, and although he was extremely handsome. And I was young, and I was probably 17 years old. Met him when I was 16, 17, and he got a summer job, and he was working this summer job with, it was in air conditioning, and the person who was training him, his name was Frank, and he was an air conditioning mechanic. And Frank invited us up to his parents' country home upstate for a weekend with another couple. This was the first time I met Frank, and they had a little 3-acre farm, and I love being in the outdoors and getting my hands dirty. Frank's mom told me the story later on that she looked out the window and was watching us playing outside in the dirt and what I was doing, cutting and picking vegetables and picking worms. And she told Frank, that's the woman you're going to marry. And Frank kind of like laughed. I was 7 years younger than him at the time, and he knew that I had a boyfriend. But Frank realized that my boyfriend at the time was putting me down and speaking to me in harsh terms, and he tried to tell him, you know, you really shouldn't treat a woman like that, it's not good. And a couple of times we met after that, and Frank just said to me, you know, you really need to either straighten him out or just leave him, it's not good for you. Anyway, one thing led to another, and I did break up with my boyfriend, but I did remain friends with Frank, and we got together and we started dating, and he kept telling me, you're too young for me, you're 18 years old, and I'm 26. And we got married. We were married for 6 years, 6 very good years, both working very, very hard. I wish, you always can look back and say you wish you would have done things, you wish you knew then what you know now. Probably wouldn't have worked so hard, probably would have spent more time having fun and enjoying each other. But we were young. And I was young, and we worked hard, and he worked hours and hours, and he worked crazy hours, and I had a very demanding executive secretary job. And then one day he was gone. But life moves on. As I mentioned, my first husband died. He was 33 years old of a massive heart attack suddenly, and it changed my focus. I was an executive secretary. I never thought much about health and fitness and taking care of myself, and was very confused when my first husband passed away. And that changed my whole focus in life, looking at what makes the human body tick. How do you stay healthy? Why would a young person just suddenly die? Back then, smoking was something that everybody kind of did. It was never even mentioned that it was bad for your health. So I started researching into eating better. I quit smoking, wanted to take care of myself. In the gym, the owner of the gym said to me, wow, you really have a nice physique. How would you like to be in my bodybuilding competition, a local competition? And I thought he was out of his mind. I said, I would never do that. But as is my rule, I eventually said yes to him, and I never do things halfway. So I learned everything there was to learn about lifting weights and posing, and got really into it. Learned about diet, nutrition, and got on a really good program. Hired a professional bodybuilder to help me with posing and learn about eating habits, and did a lot of reading. And one thing led to another. I did his show. My mother wouldn't talk to me. She said, I'm not going to have my daughter standing on stage in a bikini posing. But I did it, and I won the show. And I brought my mom the trophy, and she became my biggest fan after that. And just winning that led to one thing after another. There was another show, and the owner said, well, gee, you should do this show and the next show. And I eventually did, I think it was 17 shows. And in all 17 shows, I came home, except for one. The national championships in Florida was the only one I didn't bring home a trophy. So I was pretty pleased with myself. My husband, Frank, I explained, passed away of a massive heart attack. And in order to let me know, they had to come to my house to tell me. So someone from his job contacted the local priest from the parish and a police officer. And the three of them came to my house to tell me that my husband had passed away. And that police officer was Joe. And I have a very vivid memory of the man that my husband worked with, who I knew, standing in front of me with the priest next to him, and Joe standing behind them, and the priest telling me that my husband had passed away. And my eyes focused on Joe standing behind them, looking at me with tears in his eyes. And that was my first visual that stuck in my head of Joe. Of course, after that, panic set in, grief, disbelief, and it went from there. Joe was concerned about me, and during the whole funeral and everything, he was around checking to make sure I was doing okay. And we got to talking, and some time went by, and he would come by the house and talk to me to see how I was doing, and I would want to see how he was doing, because he was going through a divorce that he was having such trouble with. So we were both in our own type of grief, and trying to help each other through it. He was struggling with not being with his kids all the time, and he loved his children, and I was struggling with just being a woman alone, and totally didn't understand why something like this could happen at such a young age, at the height of what was great in life. And we talked, and we became friends, and he would come and we'd sit on the stoop in front of my house. And time went by, months went by. He came over to my mom's house one day, because my mom wanted him to come over for dinner. And he came for dinner one day, and we sat down and we had salad and stuff, and he got to know my mom and my dad and my sister. And it was not too long after that my kid sister said to me, this is my younger kid sister, she said, do you see how he looks at you? Do you have any idea how much this man likes you? And it was like, I just didn't focus in on it until she said that to me. And then I started seeing and letting my guard down, letting myself feel again. And that's when the doors opened, and it became more than just this friendship of us trying to help each other. Months after that, I moved, and Joe came over one night, and he never went home.
Ellen and I lived with each other for approximately 16 years. And then one day I said, I think it's time that maybe we should have a marriage certificate. I had a ring, and I asked her to marry me. And she said yes. So I was very happy, and we decided, let's have a big party and invite all our friends. And the rest is history. We've been together ever since. It's 25 years now that we're married. We got married in June of 1990, and in June it'll be 25 years.
The best advice to give, I think, what I would like to especially give to Joe's grandchildren is keep your eyes open and follow your heart. Don't be blind to what's around you. So many times we close ourselves off, we're in such a hurry that we don't see and we don't listen to what's going on in our heart. And that you really need to do, because you can miss a lot of things in life if you don't follow your heart.